There, all you beautiful internet people. Today, as you can see, I'm wearing the classic orange plaid. I haven't worn this in a while, but that's because today we're doing a retrospective because I got 500 subs. Oh heck yeah, 500, big 500. Yeah, that's right. I'm a big YouTuber now. I have been waiting for 500 subs for well over a year at this point, and if this rate keeps up, I should have 1,000 subscribers sometime around 2032 or so. But hopefully I make it before then. Regardless, thank you so much for 500 subscribers. You have no idea what this means to me. It's amazing. I feel on top of the world right now. I may never get that 100,000 play button or that 1 million play button, but frankly, I don't really give a shit because I make these videos not for money, but just for the pure enjoyment of it all. Just the thrill of being able to post absolutely anything I want to that comes into my sick, diseased noggin straight onto the internet for your viewing enjoyment. I mean, that's really a privilege. And I am so grateful to be out here on the internet. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed what I've put out so far. I got way more stuff coming, so just you wait. You're going to be amazed. Now, all that said, I figured for this 500 sub special, I'd indulge in a little retrospective, a little review of some comics that are extremely obscure. These type comics are the comics you haven't seen or heard about. These are the types of comics that have remained locked up in the Nicolas vault. This ain't College Buddies or Rubbish Randy. This is some obscure shit. Now, this isn't a complete analysis of every comic I've ever drawn or anything. There are tons of obscure fucking comics I've drawn that go all the way back to kindergarten. I've been drawing for as long as I can possibly remember. I've just been drawing and drawing and drawing. I'm an absolute drawing machine. But these are some of the more recent ones. These are around the era which I like to term the modern Nicolas Comics era, which started in 2016 with the release of Herman the Hitchhiker. Anywho, without further ado, let's get into some of these obscure, unfinished projects. Some of them are unfinished, some of them simply aren't included in the Nicolas Comics catalog for whatever reason. Maybe I don't think they're quite up to the standard of quality I've put onto the Nicolas Comics catalog. Nonetheless, if someone did write in and asked for one of these, copies of some of these, I might say, well, alright. But to date, nobody has been curious enough to actually inquire about the hidden gems of the Nicolas Comics universe. So let's go through them. This first one here is called Ayn Rand and George Orwell, Time Travelers. This was back when I was still during my stick figure age. I'm not sure how well any of these comics will show up on the camera, but you can see Ayn Rand and George Orwell there as stick figures. Back when I drew every character as stick figures. Now I only draw some of them as stick figures. I know that some people say, oh, stick figures aren't complex enough. They don't have enough detail. You know what I say to that? Fuck you, stick figures are cool as shit. But this here was essentially a comic I did around my senior year of high school, so around like 2019. I think maybe early 2020. Where I basically thought up, you know, what if Ayn Rand and George Orwell, two of the worst writers of all time, whose novels are just garbage anti-communist propaganda, what if they met up and then, like, they traveled through time? So basically, like, the concept would be like George Orwell goes back to the founding of America, and he goes into, you know, Independence Hall while they're writing up the Constitution. He's like, you should think about abuses of power because the government's going to abuse their power and stomp on the free will of the individual or whatever. And then all the founding fathers, you know, like Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, they're like, we are the government, you fucking idiot. And they like toss his ass out onto the street. You know, really fun scenarios like that. I think I entertained the idea of Ayn Rand and George Orwell going back to like caveman times at one point. just kind of a really fun idea, because I think it's so cool to think of like crossovers between famous literary and historic figures, especially if, you know, they're given the power to like time travel throughout time. The first 4 pages of this actually are complete. Eventually I'll probably put all these unfinished comics in like a coffee table book or something. But this here was eventually, of course, scrapped, and I don't think I'll ever finish it because I made my film The Orwellians, which is also about Ayn Rand and George Orwell crossing over and interacting. And I think The Orwellians is a much more interesting exploration of that. And I don't really think they need to time travel for it to be interesting per se. I think The Orwellians is a good enough movie to explore this idea. I don't think there needs to be a comic, but I'll probably release the first 4 pages eventually. This here is Super Rock Concert 2020, or the unfinished, completely unfinished first installment of it. It was going to be a 5-part mini-series with each issue. You can see how thick this is. Each issue had like 50 or so pages. This was an ambitious project where my characters, Mr. Grapefruit and Chubby, basically start like a music competition, and there's all these parody bands. There's like a parody of AC/DC, there's a parody of Talking Heads, there's like a parody of Eminem, and this was supposed to be like this giant, really ambitious project where I just basically parody all these rock bands. Eventually I just kind of got bored of it because there's only so many ways you can like parody you know, different like musicians and stuff. And this was all the way back in 2020, 2 years ago, so I'll probably never finish it. Although the first issue is, if I recall, about 90% done, so I'll probably release it eventually. It features some of the same collage effects I would later use to great effect in The Divine Tapestry. And Super Rock Concert 2020 is also, of course, an interesting project because it features my Eminem parody, Mike and Ike's, who later appeared in an issue of Herman the Hitchhiker, which is kind of an interesting fact to think about. This here is a comic I actually completely forgot I made until just now when I was looking through the stack of my comics, actually. This is The Revengers. This is a hilarious Marvel parody. You can see there I basically spoof the Marvel font that they always use, where like the edges of the letters are always all jaggedy at the ends of the sticks of the letters. And basically you got, you know, a bunch of different characters. It's a pretty fun, simple style, you know. I wasn't going for anything too ambitious here. But in essence, this was going to be kind of a really nice, ambitious Avengers parody back when, you know, this was back around the time when Endgame was coming out and Infinity War. Date says is 2019, so yeah, back when the Avengers were the big hype. Eventually I just realized, you know, like Marvel is so stupid in solo effort and the Avengers are such shit characters, it's not worth making a parody of. It's not that funny. I already did that in Why Hello There, Come On In, which is actually in the catalog, so I decided not to do it. What we got here, Thorm, obviously a parody of Thor, Bleak Widow instead of Black Widow, Black Cougar, parody of Black Panther, Metal Man, who is Genius Tony Dork, Yellow Jacket and Insect Man, obviously Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Patriot, parody of Captain America, Slump, who's a parody of the whole Dr. Weird, parody of Doctor Strange, obviously. So, you know, eventually I just realized, like, I can do better, you know. I can pick higher hanging fruit than this, essentially. I think was the reason I dropped this. Next comic I want to talk about isn't actually, I don't actually have it on hand. I wasn't able to find it. But it's a parody of Sergio Aragonés, my least favorite cartoonist in Mad Magazine. It was called Unfunny Little Doodle People Doing Random Shit. And if I remember correctly, I was able to parody Mr. Aragonés' style pretty well. I'm not a fan at all of his pantomimes, choppy just pumped out shovelware garbage all that much, and I was able to replicate his style pretty early. I'm pretty good at that, like replicating the given style of a given cartoonist. But I never really came out with that because I figured it's kind of an inside joke among the comics industry. Not many people really know who Sergio Aragonés is. You know, it's kind of like, you know, what else is new? Sergio Aragonés comics are shit, whatever. So, yeah. Next up, we have Simpler Times. This one here is one of the earlier ones. I think this was back in like 2018, 2017, something like that. This here is a period piece set in 1925, following the typical American family of 1925. So basically, it's a fun kind of little nod to like the Bungle family or some of those old time, 1920s newspaper strips, Moon Mullins or whatever. But I'm not sure why this never made it into the catalog. This one is actually finished. This one is complete. It's 4, 6. Yeah, it's like nine pages of comics, and it was a pretty decent concept. But I think these characters are just kind of too simple, and this does have a very like rough style that's very present in my earlier work, like Herm the Hitchhiker especially. Not everything in my catalog is all that polished. Some of it is really simple shit, because I was like 15 or whatever, but I feel it's worth selling anyway because it is funny. But this just ultimately wasn't really interesting enough to make it into the catalog, I don't think. Maybe I will put it in the catalog after I make this video, I don't know. If you want Simpler Times, hit me up, write me. The next comic is yet another one I don't have on hand, but it was called Comic Book Biatches, and I only did the cover for this, if I recall, but it was meant to be drawn in this extremely realistic style, and it would follow these two stupid ladies at a comic book store, and they only read like the worst comics, like Mouse and A Contract with God and Watchmen, and they have like zero taste for the more obscure, refined stuff, and they read Scott McCloud, and they're like, oh wow, it's Scott McCloud, what a genius. I hate Scott McCloud, I hate his frickin' Flash shirt, and he pretends like he's the big expert on comics, even though he's only made one comic, so it's not like he really has room to speak on the matter, and the only comics he names as great examples of the genre are like, again, the worst ones, like Watchmen and Mouse, and these ones that are way fucking overhyped and are not anywhere near the best comics. So this comic was basically meant to like spoof the really dumb comic buying consumer who just goes to like an online list of like the top 10 best comics, Dark Knight Returns, without really doing their research and realizing like, well, like Tales from the Crypt kicks frickin' Watchmen's ass any day of the week. Again, kind of an inside joke, too meta for my taste. I like making comics that are entertaining on their own instead of just comics about comics, because at that point, I'd basically just be the next Scott McCloud, and who wants to be Scott McCloud? I do call Scott McCloud Scott McCloud, though, which I think is funny. Okay, next up here, we got Clyde P. Wellington, Jungle Explorer Extraordinary. Essentially, this was a big satire, a big spoof of the classic jungle comics, Tarzan, you got your Tarzans, you got your Sheena, Queen of the Jungles, obviously. I mean, Sheena's up there among the best, obviously, because she's a woman, and that's kind of rare for the age. But there were a lot of jungle comics back in the day that were just like very stupid and really didn't give a nuanced perspective on the African continent. And, furthermore, were often extremely racist and kind of advocated for colonialism, especially British imperialism. There was a point where Britain controlled basically like 95% of the African continent, the entire thing. They just divvied up all the countries and destroyed all the indigenous groups. And a lot of jungle comics really do glorify that kind of like Eurocentric imperialist perspective, which I'm not a big fan of. So Clyde P. Wellington here was basically designed to like take the piss out of those ideas. And Clyde here is just a massive racist piece of shit. He's just a giant soldier of fortune, just a giant opportunist, just a massive egotist. He's like, "Welcome, dear reader, come, let us investigate the untold wonders of the ancient world and do other shit as well. Has anybody seen my toothbrush?" So basically it'd be like, he has this like travel guide who he treats like shit and calls Buona all the time, and he thinks he's like Lawrence of Arabia, just a delusional lunatic, I thought that was a funny idea, and really a great commentary on the jungle comics genre, because all too often they're just like complete crap. And I thought, pointing out kind of the racist tropes of the genre would be kind of funny. I had great hopes for Clyde P. Wellington, Jungle Explorer Extraordinary, but unfortunately there's an interesting story as to why I never finished this one. I probably would have, but I brought it to a funeral because I was really bored. I've been to more funerals than I've been to weddings. In fact, I don't think I've ever been to a wedding in my goddamn life, which, being to so many funerals, that might kind of explain my disposition and my general outlook. But I was going to bring this to the funeral and like draw it while they were giving the eulogy and, lowering the casket into the ground. And I was told, because this was back when I was like 16, 17, I was told, "Oh, you can't bring your comic to the funeral, you gotta leave it in the car." So I was just like, fuck that, I'm not going to the funeral. I'm gonna sit here by this tree if you lock my comic up in the car and you won't let me take it down to the funeral. It's not like I'm being disrespectful to the corpse or anything. I just want to draw my comic while they're giving the boring speech, the boring monologue about, the person who died. I just don't want to be bored, and comics are really the only way to excite me. I was pretty immature back then, in case you couldn't tell. But, that's the reason I never finished this one, because I wasn't allowed to draw it at the funeral. And when anyone tells me I don't get to draw comics because of whatever fucking reason, I get pissed. And eventually I just kind of stopped drawing this one because of the bad memories associated with it. Alright, next up we got one that I think everyone's been waiting for. And given that I got 500 subs, I think this is the time to break it out. This is my yearbook from 2012 to 2013. I was 11 back then. And this is the famous comic where I played Donald Trump. This obviously was from before Donald Trump became the president, so it's a pretty exciting historic artifact. Now, I didn't look anything like Donald Trump back then. It's just because I had orange hair, and they were like, "Oh, you should play Trump." So they used this extremely 2013 type program where you scan photographs in and make it look like a comic, and basically I played Donald Trump, and I have fond memories of this. This was lost for some time, but this here is the full comic. I'm probably not going to scan it in yet. Maybe if I get to 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, that's what I'll do if I get to 1,000 subscribers. I will scan in this exciting historic artifact, but here's a little sneak peek. Just because it's so crazy that I played Donald Trump in 2013. I think it's because I just didn't know who Donald Trump was, because I didn't watch shitty reality TV, and back then, all he was known for was The Apprentice and being a massive shit, and I didn't know, so I was like, oh, a rich guy, being rich sounds fun, I'll make believe that. And I was given like chocolate coins, if I remember, as props, which I got to eat, so that was pretty cool and epic. And this is from 2013, so 10 years old at this point, a historic artifact. That's coming at 1,000 subs, so if you want to see that, you know what to do. Next up, we have random stuff. I mentioned this comic in my Comics Crazy video, actually. If I remember correctly, we're at a random stack of some of the comics I had finished at that point. But this is not in the Nicolas Comics catalog. This was just never put in there. This is a good example of just a really random type comic that I used to make all kinds of experimental comics like this. And they were very simple, but they were very out there. I just kind of threw everything at the wall to see what stuck. This is basically like 21-page comics that are extremely fun. And this is back when I just had so much imagination. I was so bored by high school. This was around probably like 10th, 11th grade. I was so bored by high school, I was like, I gotta draw. I gotta get my ideas out onto the paper. So These comics are very simple, but they are fun to look at, and I might release this into the Nicolas Comics catalog actually now. If you want to see random stuff in the Nicolas Comics catalog, comment down below, let me know you want it, or write me at Nicholas Cicada, 1424 Columbine Street, number 1, Denver, Colorado 80206, the official address to write to if you want Nicolas Comics, if you want the Nicolas Comics catalog, and to order Nicolas Comics. That's the only way to do it. This is another comic that was mentioned in the Comics Crazy video, but for whatever reason never made it into the Nicolas Comics catalog. This is Foreign Folks. I think the reason this didn't make it into the catalog was because it really is an out there idea. As you can see, unlike pretty much all of my other comics, this one is drawn on line paper. So it's a little weirder to look at, and every drawing is a continuous line drawing. Essentially, every page you have a different planet and all these different characters encircling the planet, and they're all in a continuous line. And the basic idea is that language is a barrier to communication and ultimately doesn't really serve a purpose other than making communication difficult between all these people all around the various planets. And then at the end you get to Earth, and all the people around the Earth are like, my language is the best, my language is the best, my language is the best, everyone should speak my language. I used to be a lot more angry about having to learn Spanish in high school, having to learn a different language, because I just felt like there should just be one standard language for the world. But then I realized, you know, like, this is one of the things I've really changed my perspective on since then. Like, it's cool that we have so many fucking languages, and the more languages the better, you know. It's good to have a wide range of languages, even if it makes communication between different countries basically impossible. I was basically just salty because like they force you to learn a language in high school, you know. I like Spanish. I'm glad I learned Spanish, and it has a lot of practical application, having Spanish as a secondary language. But I do still maintain that English gets way too much shit from all these people who are like, English doesn't actually make any sense, it's hard to understand. It's like, it's not hard to understand if you're raised in it, if it's your native language, the same as any other language. Like, I'd argue there are much more difficult languages to understand. Hieroglyphs are a bit more complex and a bit more layered than flipping English. Any linguistics teacher will agree with you there. You know, English isn't that hard. English gets a lot of shit, and I'm not a big fan of that. But ultimately, I think Foreign Folks just didn't really make it into the Nicolas Comics catalog because it's a kind of weird concept and just is about languages, and that's kind of not the most fun idea. And it's kind of repetitive, too. I don't know. This here is Nicolas Comics Pulp Fiction Issue 1 Horror. If I remember correctly, I was going to make this a whole series, you know, like one issue would be horror, one would be sci-fi, one would be western, you know, a whole series trying to encapsulate the great comic genres of the past. One issue would be like war comics, one issue would be like, you know, basically like what AC does with all the different genres, all the different genre comics. This one here has Itch and Other Terrifying Stories. I think this one is finished. But the drawings are just extremely simple. Like I said, it's nothing too fancy. Here's my drawing of some ghosts. Give you a good idea of what I was drawing back in 2016, 2015. Very simple shit. But really, you know, I started from humble beginnings, and I mean, College Buddies does look quite a bit more advanced than this, but that's really the only way you improve at drawing, is just keep fucking drawing and draw and draw and draw and just go at it and go at it and go at it. You're not going to improve drawing if you just stop because some assholes online tell you that your art sucks. I think this art is pretty funny. Like, look at this guy, right? Look at this guy here. Doesn't that just look great? Doesn't this guy just look funny? I might add this to the catalog. Like I said, this one's also finished, and I don't know, there's something very charming about these 2015, 2016 classics. Can't exactly place it. Okay, next up we have Tales of Terrifying Terror. This was a very similar idea. I'm pretty sure This was, I forget if this was made before or after the other one, but this was another horror anthology comic that I made. I just freaking love horror anthologies. I still do, and I'm actually going to come out with a new one pretty soon, and it's going to be cool as shit. This one has, I think this one was made before the other one, but yeah, this one here is just like amazing. This one actually has better art, even though it was made before the other one. This one has really good art. Again, any of these comics you think you'd want to see, you'd want to get in the Nicolas Comics catalog, let me know if any of these look interesting to you. There's Tales of Terrifying Terror there. Got a scary face on the front. This here is Bad Magazine. I'm not sure. I don't think this is in the catalog. This is a parody of, obviously, Mad Magazine. At the point where I felt like Mad Magazine was getting really old and repetitive and kind of shitted satire, and you know, all the artists anyone gave a shit about had like died, and it was just like becoming complete garbage. So this is like satire of satire, which is kind of next level. Essentially, I think the reason this was never made in the catalog, maybe I think I lost it at one point and I didn't find it, so it didn't make it in the catalog. But this is good shit, and this also is complete parody of the shitty newer Mad magazines. I've made a whole ass video about the downfall of Mad Magazine, the real decline of Mad Magazine, how the content just fell so hard from greatness. It's really like a modern day tragedy almost. Basically, here on the back cover, I got my parody of Alfred E. Newman, Baffled Bee Chop Suey, and he's got the stupid ears and everything. Baffled Bee Chop Suey is Darth Vader, and it's just him, but he's saying, "Luke, I am your father." You know, because I felt like that's what Mad Magazine was resorting to, just having Alfred E. Newman on the cover, but he's like dressed up as Shrek or whatever, and it's so lazy and unoriginal, and really a step down from those classic Jerry Mungo portraits. It's like, you know, Alfred E. Newman's in the umbrella, but the rain's coming from the inside of the umbrella, or he's like on the upside down swing. Those ones are really imaginative, but later in Mad's lifespan, it was just like, oh, now Alfred E. Newman is Darth Maul or whatever. And it was very lazy, so I make fun of that here. Baffled Bee Chop Suey's first portrait 20 years ago. Baffled Bee Chop Suey's present cover variant as the Joker, though. This is pretty funny. I might put this in the Nicolas Comics catalog. Oh yeah, I made this really expansive parody of a Planet Tad in here. And I just hate Planet Tad so much. I was like, fuck Tad, you know. I'm gonna rip a new one into this. This was this is actually really good. I should put this in the catalog. Again, if you want to see it, let me know. Okay, just two more things here. This, of course, some of you will recognize this. This is the Nicolas Comics newsletter. I made this all the way back in, I think, pretty recently, maybe 2020. Yeah, I think 2020. This is basically a little 4-page typewritten. I wrote this on my typewriter, my AX15 typewriter, maybe AX10, I forget the exact model. It's a really great electric typewriter. And I called this The Courier of the Last Great Comics Empire. The basic idea was anyone who ordered my comics through the mail would get this monthly. It was a very high-effort monthly newsletter that was going to be sent out to every address who bought some of my comics and was interested. And basically, it was like, you know, different articles about upcoming projects, pics of classic comics that I thought deserved kind of a shout-out, trivia, College Buddies poster, new laser printer. This was back when I got my new laser printer, so I was like, I'll put that in here. Basically just a little newsletter, because I'm not a big fan of those, like, you know, email newsletters that you send out to a bunch of emails. You know, that's spam, right? And I wanted to do something a little cooler, a little more high effort, so I was like, I'm gonna make this little 4-page staple booklet for anyone who buys my comics. Ultimately, I decided not to do this just because, like, nobody bought my comics, you know? Nobody did. And that's sad. Not enough people bought my comics for me to want to make one of these every month and send it out to all the cool people who were interested. I might bring this back at some point, you know? If enough people buy my comics by writing to me, again, at Nicholas Cicada, 1424 Columbine Street, number 1, Denver, Colorado, 80206. For that catalog, you might be surprised by a new issue of the Nicholas Comics newsletter in your mailbox soon. So, something to think about. Might want to break out the envelope and stamps, just saying, because this is a very, very cool idea, and I'd like to bring it back, because it is, I think, something that really separates Nicholas Comics from a lot of other comics that I'm willing to... I'd have to pay a lot of stamps for this, but I don't know. It is fun, so. Finally, the last comic. This right here, out of all the projects, out of all the unfinished ones, this is the most likely one I am to finish. I've been thinking, you know, every day, like, what if I just finished this one? What if I just picked up the pencil and went back to work on this one and finished it, and it'd be a lost classic? Because I started this one back in 2019, the same year as College Buddies, back when College Buddies 5 was coming out, back during the peak of College Buddies mania. In College Buddies 5, there's these two characters, Beardo and Baldo, the lawyer bros, and you wonder, like, what are they doing there? Well, they were going to have their own solo comic, their own thing. Basically, Beardo and Baldo are like parodies of Bacchus and Shanker, the two lawyers from Denver. They're not actually brothers in real life, but here they're brothers. You know, one has a beard and one's bald, so I called them Beardo and Baldo. Here in Denver, basically, lawyers are kind of the big celebrities, and I know all the lawyer names more than I know, like, basically, current celebrity names. I know Joseph Ramos and Mike Sawaya and Frank Azar, and all of these, you know, there's a ton. There's a ton of freaking lawyers in Denver who all, like, have their own thing going on. So I was like, you know, I'm going to make a comic that just, like, takes the piss out of all these lawyers and makes a funny parody at them, you know, kind of pokes fun at them. I got Freddie Ozark, the Strong Hand. You got Darling S. Elijah. That's Darrell S. Elliott, obviously. I actually put Floyd Little in here before he died, you know, the Bronco, because he used to be in all the Darrell S. Elliott ads. You know, now he's dead, so I don't know. It's kind of funny. I don't know. Like I didn't know he was gonna die, so that kind of makes this comic a little mean-spirited. But I still want to finish it because I think making fun of all these lawyers is, like, really funny. Oh yeah, Jeff Goldwinson, a parody of Jeff Goldwinson, or whatever his name is. I gotta look these up. They're really funny. There's just, like, so many lawyers in the Denver area. I was like, I gotta make a comic where I just, like, make all these freaking lawyer parodies. You got Mo Chihuahua, who's a parody of Mike Sawaya, and then you got Dilemma Chihuahua, who's a parody of Diane Sawaya. That's really funny. Beardo and Baldo do need to make a comeback, because I advertised this on my website at one point. I was like, Beardo and Baldo coming soon. I feel deceptive if I didn't eventually finish this and put this out, no matter the quality, even if, you know, it's drawn in my really old style, my really, like, rough College Buddies era style. I feel like not getting this out there and finishing this and making it a permanent entry in the Nicholas Comics catalog, that really would be a crime. So, out of all of them, this is the one I'm the most regretful about not finishing. I think it's that high school just got in the way, and I wasn't able to focus on this shit. I wasn't able to focus on what I loved, because I was too busy doing all this fucking essays and shit, all this high school shit that completely zapped me of my will, you know, ruined my drive and my initiative, and I gotta finish the Lawyer Bros. That'd be so fun. So there you have it. There's a bunch of obscure, unfinished, weird comics that you're not gonna see in the Nicholas Comics catalog. unless again you ask for them. Tell me which ones you'd like to be added and I can add some, but that's the most obscure of my work there. Those are some obscure unfinished gems. Back in the day, I used to start up comics just like crazy, you know, and I just like start a new one, finish like 3 pages, you know, like staple 20 pages together, only finish like 3 pages, and then go on to the next one, because I just kept having new ideas and I wasn't able to focus enough to like really channel all my energy into one big comic, which isn't really an issue anymore. If I start a comic generally these days, I go ahead and finish it. As you can see, a lot of stuff ended up on the chopping room floor, so all those morons who back in 2019 and 2020 were like, College Buddies isn't good. You know, there's a lot of shit that I just never ended up finishing. College Buddies is like great. It's actually the cream of the crop. But yeah, there you go. 500 subscribers. Just a little history lesson here for the NCU, Nicolas Comics universe, to familiarize yourself with some of the more rare and obscure gems in my collection here, in my little possession. These are historic artifacts now, pretty much, you know. They tell a rich tapestry of my life. I think that's really fascinating. But all in all, thank you for 500 subscribers. It is absolutely epic to have reached this point and get 500 subscribers. It's taken like 4 years, you know. Growth on YouTube is so excruciatingly slow. It's not really possible. If you want to maintain artistic integrity and make the best quality videos and not just be a massive ninja ripoff sellout, you don't grow that fast here on YouTube, you know. If you don't pander to the algorithm, you don't grow that fast. But heck, that's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. So hopefully people just subscribe to my videos because they are legitimately entertained by them. My editing, my pacing, my thoughts that I put here on the internet, because I do have a lot of thoughts racing around in my mind, and I like to inscribe them onto film. So yeah, thank you for 500 subscribers. Here's to the next 500. And as always, sayonara, suckers.